When time feels limited, it's hard for teams to step back and take stock of how they work, yet alone consider how to improve it. But if your team is struggling to see results in new initiatives or strategic plans, it could be because you aren't considering how new goals fit in with current initiatives. In this episode of This Meeting Sucks, we are going to walk you through the fourth and final part of the third phase in our MeetingMakers Framework, aligning, focused on team process. Team operation looks different for every industry and workplace. So let's discover how you can find what works best for you and your team. We will take you through our process mapping agenda template, which you can access for free on Session Lab using the link in the description. I'm your host, Lauren Green, meeting coach and facilitation trainer, here to help you unsuck your meetings one episode at a time. I've helped hundreds of professionals and organizations through leading inclusive, engaging, and productive meetings. And now I'm offering this podcast to help you do the same. Think of this podcast as an ongoing workshop, where each time you tune in, you'll get a bite-sized nugget of knowledge you can apply right away. If you lead meetings or might someday, you're in the right place. Let's make your meetings work. We were off to a slow start in a meeting with 30 members of a software development team. They were first asked to write down the steps of their design process on stickies individually. When asked to place their stickies on the wall, the participants seemed hesitant to migrate their individual sticky notes to the blank poster rolled out in front of the room. But one by one, table by table, each part of the process map was laid out in order from start to finish. Before long, participants were engaged in an energetic, friendly debate on the order of operations and uncovering a critical issue in the software rollout process that had been slowing things down for months. Once the conversation slowed, my co-facilitator and I posed a question to the group. What would it look like if it were going well? The project manager suggested identifying user stories up front so that when the team is ready to test, they know better what to test for. Then we asked what would happen if we added that step. One of the test engineers chimed in that they'd love to develop user stories with the developers up front, but there never seemed to be enough time. The project manager then suggested including user story development during onboarding with the customer. We checked if there were any objections and then jotted the new step on a green sticky note so that it would stand out as a new part of the process map. After another hour or so, we had worked through key challenge points in the existing process, and as the group reflected on their progress, the feeling in the room was tired but clear and appreciative of each other's efforts. When work is busy, it's rare for teams to step back and consider how they implement their work, let alone how they might improve it. But one of the biggest reasons that visioning and strategic planning sessions don't lead to results is because teams don't analyze how their new goals fit in with current processes. If you've been keeping up with this season, you know that we've spent a lot of time in aligning. In episode 4, we aligned on the past, in episode 5, on the present, and in episode 6, with our customer. Without alignment, teams lack the foundation they need to envision the future and may lack motivation to work towards it. Teams need a shared understanding of where they are, who they're serving, and how they operate. Team operation looks different for every industry and workplace, so it's all about finding what works best for you and your team. Let's review a few common process alignment tools. Systems thinking, developed in the 20th century from biology and engineering, looks at the relationships and patterns in a whole system rather than just its parts. Peter Senge expanded this idea in his book, The Fifth Discipline, showing how organizations can use it to continuously learn and innovate for a better future. Mapping a system is a little different than mapping a process. While process maps tend to be more linear, systems maps look like spaghetti. Systems maps tend to be more beneficial for the conversation and the learning they enable rather than as a documentation tool. So, if your team struggles to find solutions to complex challenges, a systems mapping activity can help to see the bigger picture. When you can see that big picture, it's easier to find impactful solutions considering how each parts of the picture might be impacted. There are lots of great systems thinking tools out there, and a great one hails from Lego Serious Play, a toolkit of activities designed by Lego to help facilitate team building and strategic planning discussions for teams. You have to be a Lego Serious Play certified facilitator to use these tools, but it's easy to search for a facilitator or find a certification program. We will link to some resources for this in the description. While it's not so much a process tool as a modeling tool, a business model canvas provides a high-level view of how a business or organization operates, how it serves its customers, the value it provides, and its revenue and expenses. In other words, a holistic view of the organization. The best way to learn about this tool is to grab a copy of The Business Model Generation, where the authors break down each part of the model and show examples of the model in practice. If you take a stab at the model in a meeting, you could consider setting up stations or breakout groups for each piece of the canvas separately and then putting it together like a puzzle. You can use this as a strategic planning tool by doing both a current state and a future state version of the canvas. Lastly, if you are a nonprofit and the language of business model just doesn't jive with you, you can use a mission model canvas instead. And we've included links to the book and downloadable templates in the description. Building on the last episode where we found alignment around the customer, there are lots of customer journey or customer experience mapping activities out there. Most of them involve mapping key touch points the team has with the customer on big stickies, and below them on smaller stickies, the smaller steps that the team performs behind the scenes in order to enable these touch points. If you have any touch points that you're looking to improve, gather data about where the customer experiences a pain point in order to help identify where exactly the team should look for ways to improve. We will link to an example of a customer journey map in the description. All of these tools are great methods for getting your team aligned on how they operate, and we could do an episode on every one. But for this episode, and so we don't totally overwhelm you, we are going to focus on a super basic process mapping activity that you can easily facilitate with your team. Process mapping has many other names. You might be familiar with Kaizen events. Originating from Japanese business practices, particularly from the philosophies used by Toyota in its production system, Kaizen translates to change for the better and emphasizes continuous, incremental improvement. During a Kaizen event, a selected team comes together to map out a workflow, identify inefficiencies, and quickly implement changes, often over the course of a few days to a week. The goal is to enhance productivity, efficiency, and quality by eliminating waste and optimizing processes. Value Stream Mapping, or VSM, is a lean management tool that helps visualize and analyze the flow of materials and information required to bring a product or service to a customer. Also originating from the Toyota production system, VSM was developed to identify waste and inefficiencies in the production process. Finally, Lean Six Sigma is a methodology that combines the principles of lean manufacturing and Six Sigma to improve process efficiency and quality by eliminating waste and reducing variability. It approaches process improvement through a structured, data-driven process known as DMAIC: define, measure, analyze, improve, and control. You will hear lots of terms like this thrown around when it comes to mapping processes, and those with expertise in these areas tend to be very attached to their preferred tools as a single source of truth. But I'm here to tell you, you don't need all the bells and whistles. Anyone can do a basic process improvement meeting in just a few easy steps. Map the process, identify areas of improvement, and make revisions. most of the tools out there can be broken down into these 3 steps. And once you have the process, you can take a team through the conversation and become more aligned as a result. After the break, we will walk you through our agenda for reviewing and revamping your team's process, where we will map your existing process and make tweaks and changes to improve your team's efficiency and interactions. You can find our free Session Lab template linked in the description, along with our mural, online whiteboard, or printer-friendly poster templates available for purchase. Team retreats, strategic planning offsites, or problem-solving meetings can benefit from having a third-party, neutral facilitator who is focused on the process of the meeting rather than the content. Our team of expert facilitators takes the burden of designing your meeting and navigating group dynamics off your plate so you can participate, offer your ideas, and support the group in carrying the action forward. Working with us as your expert facilitators will help you to maximize the potential of your team to do their best work, create space for innovation and forward thinking, and host annual retreats that will have a lasting impact even after you get back to the office. If you love this podcast and want to work with us as your expert team, visit makemeetings.work/contact to partner with us and make your meetings work. Welcome back, Meeting Makers. We're going to go through our process mapping workshop. Our workshop takes about a day, more specifically 9 to 4:30. As in any of our agenda templates, you could certainly split this up, maybe do 2 half days, or even separate out these steps into multiple online meetings that could be shorter. So in our agenda, we start at 9 o'clock with a welcome and kickoff from the leader. In our Session Lab agenda template, we've included a script for this, so that makes it a little bit easier for our leaders to formulate their thoughts. Certainly, it's important to kick off with what the outcome is, which is to review our current processes and identify as a team areas for improvement in order to improve our productivity and efficiency. Then we do agenda and agreements. So this would be done by the facilitator. That could also be the leader, but you want to go through the agenda in order to clarify the meeting flow and also offer agreements for success. Just like in any of our agenda templates, we have offered some example agreements, which I'll walk through, but you can feel free to choose meeting agreements or meeting ground rules in order for you to have a successful meeting. The 3 that we've offered in our agenda are seek to understand, as in seek to understand others before being understood. The principle of the beach ball. If you look at a beach ball, everyone sees a different color depending on their perspective, but everybody is looking at a beach ball. And lastly, GEPO, which stands for good enough, press on. Then we've got introductions. This is just to get to know who's in the room. It's probable that if you're an intact team, you already know who is in the room. And so if that is the case, then just have each person share a quick hope for today's meeting. For example, I'm Lauren, and I hope to learn more about our team's process and how we can improve it. Just like in our other agenda templates, we recommend energizers. Energizers are not icebreakers. They are meant to energize or warm up the brain. They are always very purposeful. So we're going to offer the Energizer Draw Toast. And this is actually from a TED Talk by Tom Wujek. We've split this Energizer into 2 parts. So one before we start defining our work processes, and one before we move later in the day where we're going to revise those work processes. The instructions for this are to invite participants to first individually draw how they would make toast. And then you ask each person to share and then reflect as a full group. If you're working online, then participants can simply draw this in their own workspace, or they can share their drawing via their webcam. If you have that blurred background, they may need to turn the blurred background off in order to be able to hold it in front of the webcam, but as long as they hold it in front of their face, you'll be able to see. And then what you're looking for in the reflection is for people to simply notice the differences and similarities in their drawings. So people will say, well, some people have people in theirs and some people don't. And some people included this step and I didn't think of that. And that's exactly what you want. You want people to recognize and reflect that they each have a different part of the process, but together they have a more complete picture. Later in the day, part two of this energizer is actually for participants to combine their drawings, so to work on a group version of their process, combining the best of all of their drawings so that they have a more complete picture. The first step in our day is defining work processes, and we've given this about 30 minutes, the purpose being to review existing processes involved in our work. So first, you will note for the participants that before we make any changes, we need to understand what we're currently doing. For some teams, this may be already documented as standard operating procedures, SOPs, and for others, it may never have been done before, and that's okay. Define what a work process is, a set of steps that a team follows to achieve goals such as efficiency, effectiveness, and satisfaction. Then invite the team to name things that they consider a work process and write these on sticky notes, one process per sticky. Any processes that fit together could be defined or named as a single process. And invite the team to rank which processes they think could be revised, either based on the current level of perceived challenge or the importance of that process to meeting a customer need. Politely discourage any actual revising at this stage. You're just trying to get a list of what the current team processes are. If you're an events planning team and you plan a big event every year, you may have a whole set of processes that align around planning the annual meeting for the organization. If you're a software development company, you may have a process for testing, you may have a process for development, you may have a process for revising the product with the customer. So anything that you do that is a series of steps, again, is a process. If you already are going into this meeting knowing exactly which work processes you're going to work on, this might be pretty fast or could be skipped altogether. But let's assume that you don't have that already documented. It's important for the team to list everything out before you decide what you're actually going to work on for improvement. If you are doing a process mapping activity in relation to working with customers, kind of building on our last episode, aligning on the customer, then you may want to focus this initial process brainstorming only on processes where the customer has a touch point. Once you have defined the work processes, now you're going to map them. Start with whatever is the top ranked process and invite the team to write out each step in that process on a sticky note. You're going to map the stickies in order from start to finish. During this process, the team may want to create swim lanes such as customer touch points or tasks performed by a specific person or sub-team. And participants may also want to draw lines to indicate dependencies or visually mark any areas of approval that might be needed. This is a very dynamic process. It's meant to be messy, and the group could take this in a lot of different directions. So as a facilitator, if you perceive that things are going off track, just let the conversation go for a little while. A lot of times the clarification that's happening in those quote unquote off-track conversations are actually really helpful for sense making. When there's a natural pause, you could bring the group back by saying, how do you want to capture that in our map? But allow some of those conversations to happen. Chances are the group needs them to happen in order to make sense of their experience of how they work together. If the group has any blank spots or areas of uncertainty, you can indicate them for now. Just put a blank sticky note or maybe an open box, and you can come back to that in the next step. If the group starts to engage in any process improvement, so how do they fix things, politely discourage this by saying something like, hey, we just want to get our current state process mapped for now, and we're going to get to the improvement part in just a little bit. So for now, let's just try to make sure we have a clear understanding of what we currently do. If they can't let it go, you could ask them to put a star or indicate in some ways areas of improvement for the team to return to. If there's time, invite the team to map another process. We've given this an hour in full. That may be enough time to only do one, or you could get 5 done in that time. It depends on the complexity of the process and the complexity of the conversation. For large groups of 8 or more, consider using breakout groups. Each group can work on the same process and then come together, or each group can take a different process and then share it and receive feedback. This may require some additional time in your agenda, so you'll just want to make sure that you account for that. Consider setting aside a separate meeting for processes that require additional information or involve other people or teams. Now, if you're focusing your process mapping workshop on customer journey maps or processes that involve the customer, then as you do this mapping activity, I would separate out any customer touch points at the top. For example, emailing the customer, having a meeting with the customer, those are all customer touch points. And then any support activities that happen behind the scenes that the customer doesn't see, map those below the surface. So you have multiple swim lanes with customer touch points at the top and then supporting activities below it. In our agenda, this gets us to a little after 11, and we've offered a 15-minute break. Although this timing of the break is a little bit awkward because they will have been going for 2 hours. And if you're going to break for lunch at noon, then the group may have wanted to take a break earlier. I would just account for that in the time that you had before. Sometimes what I do is if groups are working in breakouts, just say take a break when you need it. But if they really haven't taken any break right now, this is a good time to do so. And you may want to just push lunch a little bit later. The next step in this is to then identify areas of improvement. So some of the groups may not have been able to help themselves and they are already thinking about where they want to fix things. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as they were able to articulate where all the challenge points are. If the team has already begun identifying areas of improvement by starring or indicating them, then continue this process until all areas of improvement are identified, not fixed, but just identified in some way. So you want to consider, are there any areas of duplication or waste or rework? Are there any steps that might be misordered? Are there any stuck points or dependencies, areas of confusion, or barriers that work against the process? Anything like that should be circled or starred in some way. If there are many areas to review, the team may need to agree on the best place to start or prioritize those through dot voting or a rank sort. Another tip, if you did the last exercise where you mapped processes in small groups, then you could also continue this process in small groups. So each small group would identify the areas of improvement for their specific group. If you want to do any kind of share outs at this point to get feedback, this is definitely going to need a little bit more time than the 35 minutes before lunch that we have given it. We've got lunch for an hour. And then, like we said in the beginning, we are inviting the team to do a part 2 draw toast energizer. This would be to take the drawing toast images that they did earlier in the day and then work in pairs or small groups to come up with a group version of that process. Then you invite the groups to share their drawings with the full group, reflecting on this as you go through. The group should start to realize that when they have the group picture, the group version, that it ultimately is better. If you're working online, you can still do this. I would just use a tool like an online whiteboard. We like Mural, but you could definitely do this in a shared slide deck or a shared Google Doc, anything where groups can work together to mock up a process. Okay, we have defined our work processes. We've mapped our work processes. We took a break somewhere in there. Then we've identified areas of improvement. Some of you may do this agenda only working on one process, and some of you might be working on multiple processes. So we'll try to speak to both as we go through. But the next step we're going to be working on is now revising those current processes. So moving from current state to creating an ideal state of what the process would look like if it was going well. The first step is to invite the team to offer a suggested change for each area that they've identified for improvement. You're going to capture suggestions in a different colored sticky or consider making a new version of the process as a future or ideal state version. Whenever the group hits any stuck points in this conversation where there may be more than one way to resolve an improvement area, indicate this and come back to it so that the group can complete as much of the revision as possible. Then, for each stuck point, invite the group to identify possible solutions. If a clear solution isn't identified, the group may need to combine ideas, vote, or have the leader make a final decision about the change to make. Couple tips for this. The there could be some areas of confusion or barriers that need to be resolved externally for the group to revise a process. You can indicate these as next steps to be resolved so that you can get through as quickly as possible. Also, if you started this exercise in the beginning of the day in small groups, you can also continue to work in small groups as well through this process. We've given this about an hour, but again, it could take a little bit more time or a little bit less time depending on the complexity of the process you're working on. We've got a break in our agenda at about 2:20 for 20 minutes, and then we've given an additional hour for the group to finish as needed. The last step we have is to determine action steps. So in order to carry the action forward, we need to identify any areas that we didn't get to. The first step for this is to clarify what processes are good to go and implement those changes immediately. Invite the group to list any unresolved processes, dependencies, or steps that need to be resolved with other individuals or teams that might not be present. Then invite the team to identify any other teams or individuals who might need to be informed about these key changes and design the best way to do that. Maybe an email, maybe a meeting. You may also want to note any SOPs that need to be updated. For each step, include an action owner and a time frame for getting it done. As an option, you may want to identify a time frame at which the team will review its new processes and ensure that they are working as expected. We've actually given this action steps section more time than we normally would, about 30 minutes, because there could be a lot of next steps in this process to be resolved. Finally, we've given about 15 minutes to do a reflection around success indicators, as in summarizing key takeaways and identify how we know we're going to be successful. The first step in this is to invite team members to write down one key takeaway and one thing that they will look for to know that the process has been improved. Take note of these indicators and group similar ones together. As an option, you can use success indicators to create performance measures and a system for tracking metrics, a process that we will cover in depth in episode 10 coming fall 2025. Finally, parting words from the leader, which could also be the facilitator, thanking participants for their full engagement, clarifying next steps again, and as an option, letting the team know when again they will revise or revisit this process. We've talked about this throughout going through this agenda. If you have a lot of processes to resolve and they're very complex, you may want to have multiple workshops and just work one process through during each workshop. But if you think that you're not going to have as much to work on, you could take all of your processes and work them in tandem using small groups. But just think about what's going to be best for your team. We've given you a very malleable agenda and a lot of options. And just be mindful that a lot of times these processes do go long. There's more to talk about than you think. So keep it simple. Maybe do one at a time. Just be mindful of what you think your group is going to be able to handle. All right, meeting makers, there you have it, our process mapping workshop. So in this episode, we walked you through the fourth and final part of the third phase in our MeetingMakers Framework, aligning, focused on team process. We walked you through our process mapping agenda so you are ready to improve your processes one step at a time. Just remember, meeting makers, every team, every organization, and every process is a little bit different. So be patient and let's make your meetings work. This podcast was written by Lauren Green and produced by Caitlin Murray. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a few seconds to rate and review so future meeting makers can find our community. You can find our next Meeting Makers Academy workshop on our website at www.makemeetings.work/academy. Want help with your next meeting? Reach out at makemeetings.work/contact and we'll set up time to chat.